Okay, this video is going to focus on scene changes and game object lifecycle. So, this is the Gemini update loop that happens every single update. You do the process time, and then you do the scene manager update. We have been inside scene manager private update looking at the scene update. So the current scene does all that stuff, a ton of stuff every single frame. But first, actually inside the scene manager, you check if you need to change the scene. And if you do need to change the scene, then you actually change the scene. So the idea of the scene manager is that it has two options for this change scene command. It's either a nothing command or it's an actual change scene command. So this nothing command, the execute override is like nothing. It's just an empty function. For the scene change command, it actually changes the scene. Calls the change scene function. So the idea is, most of the time, like from the beginning of the game, your scene change command is nothing. So for many frames of the game, when this execute runs in the update, right here, it'll literally just be doing nothing. Every once in a while, you will set the next scene. So what happens when you do scene manager set next scene is you give that scene change command a pointer to the next scene that you want, and then you say, okay, I'm going to change up my change command. It's actually going to be the actual change command now that actually does something. So then at the top of the next frame, when you actually call update, it goes in here and it says this isn't empty anymore. I actually need to change the scene. So go back to the scene manager and do the change scene function. And it does all the shenanigans. It has to end the scene, end the old scene, delete the old scene, update the pointer for the current scene, initialize the new scene, and then set that change command back to null. So all this has to be done in a very particular order, but then you will have successfully changed the scene. Now this change scene command is back to the null one, so at the top of the next frame, now you're in your new scene, and this is back to null. So it just will continue to do nothing for a bazillion frames until you change the scene again. So that's the basic idea. Another thing about the scene manager is just at the beginning of the game, you just create a null scene that does nothing. Once again, it's literally an empty scene with an empty initialize and scene end. But that way, you don't need to make a special method for changing the first scene. You can still use this same change scene. And like the scene end and initialize stuff, like it'll all be fine. So there is that. In order to demonstrate that, I have in my game, in the game manager, I have registered for a key press, the N key, and then when I press the N key, I do scene manager set next scene and new second scene. And second scene is just another scene. So pretty simple call. If I'm in this game and then I press the N key, I move to the other scene, no problem, close out, and also have no problems. In terms of game object lifecycle, that's the second part I want to talk about in this video. So basically, game objects can enter and exit the scene. When you want to do this, you want to go through the command broker again, because you don't want to have things registering in the same frame and then trying to deregister twice and that whole mess. So you have to do the submit shenanigans again. The submit, make sure that you have the right registration state, and then you add that to the registration broker. These entry commands are pretty simple. They just have a pointer to the game object, and then when they're executed, you actually connect to the scene. When you connect to the scene, all you do is just change your marker of registration and call scene entry or scene exit, which are user-defined methods of what they want to happen when the game object enters the scene. So there's not much management here other than just kind of marking the game object as in the scene or out of the scene and calling the methods that the user wants. So that's basically it. If I go down to like bullets are dynamically created and dynamically enter and exit the scene, right? So when I create a bullet, I get it from this bullet pool of objects, and I say, hey, I actually want this bullet to actually enter the scene. So I submit an entry, that requests that the bullet enter the scene, and then at the top of the next frame, the bullet's scene entry method will actually be called, which is right here. And so you'll register for whatever you want, do whatever you want, whatever it means for this object to enter the scene. And then same with scene exit. You want to undo all of that, basically. So yeah, when you press the space bar, you create a bullet, enters the scene, and then, like, if you collide with an obstacle, for instance, then you request to leave the scene because that bullet is dead, but you're like recycling it in this case. So if I go and I'm pressing the space bar and I'm having these collide with the Legos, which are obstacles, they are dying and dynamically being created and destroyed. Well, not created and destroyed, they're recycled, but you know what I mean. Okay, so that is scene changes and game object lifecycle.